What are the best and worst matchups for your quarterbacks and running backs for fantasy football in week 6? And how do they rank against each other? It's time to break it down right here, right now, as we break down the matchups on Locked On Fantasy Football.
Are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for SportingNews.com. My Decider column is up there. Your start, sits, and rankings combined across positions there: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and defense. Here on Locked On Fantasy Football, it's a Wednesday. That means we break down the quarterback and running back rankings, as well as the start, sit advice there for those harder decisions. We do have bye weeks here, so a lot of teams off. They are in order to the Detroit Lions, the Houston Texans, the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Tennessee Titans. So a lot of key players out, including Derrick Henry and Dameon Pierce at running back, and Josh Jacobs, our pleasant surprise of the season. You also want to have Derek Carr available for your teams, or Devontae Adams, or Darren Waller. So a lot of guys off this week, so it's going to start. The bye weeks, we got to look at different players we don't usually look at, and also have to make those tougher decisions deeper there into the pool of players across positions. So we'll tackle quarterback and running back today. We'll come back with wide receiver, tight end, and defense, as we always do on Thursday. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. And they have a special offer for you, the listener to Locked On Fantasy Football. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. We are free and available to you on all platforms. All right. We will dive in first to the quarterback rankings. And it's tough out there when you don't have a lot of options here that are reliable week to week. It's the same pool of guys that we're looking at. So number one for sure, really, you have 1 and 1A this week versus 1 and 2. Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes in the same game. Bills Chiefs. We know that epic divisional playoff game they played in the AFC last year. The numbers should be off the charts in this one as usual. So it's a start 'em if you got him game in the passing game for sure with Allen and Mahomes. But yeah, definitely they're on top here because they're going to be throwing off each other. Two elite quarterbacks going back and forth, putting up numbers. That's what we want here in fantasy football. So there's going to be a lot of shares in DFS of this game as well. But yeah, I mean, it's easy to put them at 1 and 2. So not a disappointment at all. I think they'll both come true here. Look at the Chiefs. They have a lot of holes in their secondary. The Bills have multiple injuries there on the back end. So these guys are going to light it up. The pass rushes can be kind of tricky. You got Chris Jones on one side from the inside. You got Von Miller on the other side with that deep rotation. But Chiefs are going to get it done here, throwing the ball as well as the Bills. So I like Allen a little bit better than Mahomes, but the numbers are going to be great for both quarterbacks this week. Lamar Jackson, this is a little bit trickier of a matchup. It was not great against the Bengals. He missed some throws there downfield. So I was a concern, but he still did his running thing and still had a touchdown there to Mark Andrews. So he'll be fine. Lamar Jackson in this matchup against the Giants can typically run well here. They have actually played in the stadium before. They opened up in week 1 against the Jets. So there's some familiarity there with this situation. The Giants defense a little bit tougher than the Jets, but similar in a lot of ways. So when you look at that, I think Lamar has a fine week this week. Jalen Hurts, tougher matchup, maybe his toughest of the season against the Cowboys at home. He wasn't spectacular against the Cardinals passing the ball. He did have the good game with Dallas Goedert and Devonta Smith, but A.J. Brown was a little bit quiet in that game. Hurts had to rely on 2 rushing touchdowns, but we do like that situation for sure with Hurts against the Cowboys. He's an every week start. Kyler Murray has revved it up a little bit in the past couple weeks. He got it going against the Panthers. Looked pretty good last week as well. Didn't get the multiple touchdowns. He had the one to Marquise Brown, but the other was an Eno Benjamin rushing touchdown. So we'll get into that backfield. But Kyler Murray with James Conner and Darrell Williams hurt, maybe a little bit more running for Murray this week, but the matchup is beautiful in Seattle. I would not be surprised if he took advantage of that with his running to be the top scorer of the week and surprise us with Allen Mahomes. But Kyler Murray's starting to feel a little bit. He'll get DeAndre Hopkins back there after this week. So things are looking up for Kyler Murray. If you can trade for him, I think it's a good time to do it here. If a manager is getting a little antsy there and have a good backup plan, I think you go after Kyler Murray because the upside is going to come here in the second half. Justin Herbert there, yeah, he's our other guy, the half dozen must starts this week. He's playing the Broncos. They lost their second corner, Ronald Darby, so that's a concern. Their pass rush does not have Randy Gregory anymore, so that's a concern. So this defense can be shredded, and I know it's been the Austin Eckler show the past 2 weeks, but Justin Herbert is still getting the job done. So he's solid. His ceiling may not be as high because we're hoping for a shootout with Russ Wilson, but I think he'll still be fine here with the production. Maybe a high floor player this week in Justin Herbert. All right, let's go to the guys that you may have questions about here, and but I'm going to tell you to go with them this week. Joe Burrow, look, the Ravens switched up everything last week. They went from blitz happy to blitz almost empty, not doing that much against Joe Burrow. Their teams are trying to play this zone defense, protect things. Dennis Allen's going to be careful about that. But the coverage looks the Saints provide, especially with Marshawn Lattimore a little bit banged up, are going to be a little bit more favorable for Joe Burrow to dissect. Keep in mind, he played at LSU. I know he's not from there. He's from Ohio, and he's done well playing in Ohio in his professional career. But I think he's going to be revved up. Jamar Chase, that Bayou return here. This Saints defense, I mean, you saw last week, got totally destroyed downfield by DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. It's not that defense that we think it is here this week. So I do love Burrow on the Bayou this week. So I think he rebounds, has a big game. And the Saints offense, I think, will move the ball. They can run the ball in the Bengals. Their quarterback play with Andy Dalton in a revenge game is going to be pretty impressive. We'll see. I mean, I think the biggest concern here is on the other side of the Saints not having enough resistance here. But we saw even without Chris Olave late in that game, no Michael Thomas, no Jarvis Landry, they're able to put up points. I get it. The Seahawks defense way worse than what the Bengals can offer, but the Bengals are pretty vulnerable as well. So Joe Burrow this week is going to have to throw enough, and they're a passing team anyway. So I feel really good about the Bengals rebounding with a nice offensive performance in the Big Easy. Aaron Rodgers just keeps getting it done. It's not outstanding and explosive. The Jets actually might pose a little bit of a game here. So Rodgers is going to be probably in tune here with his receivers. The Jets secondary has actually played pretty well with Sauce Gardner, the rookie first rounder, and others back there. But Jets pass rush a little inconsistent. Jermaine Johnson, the rookie, has been impressive, but he may be missing this game here. This Packers offensive line needs to play a little bit better. The running game has been a bit underwhelming, but this is a get-well game at Lambeau Field, I think, for the Packers offense, and they'll get rolling this week. Tom Brady, only one touchdown pass last week. You can't blame him when Leonard Fournette was just gashing the Falcons last week, but it's a division game, and sometimes that happens. This week it's the Steelers who are going to play that single coverage. They could adjust here with zone after they got destroyed by Josh Allen and the Bills last week, but look at the same profile of these receivers. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin in the slot. You got Russell Gage on the outside. The Steelers can't stop much of anything right now, and their secondary is bad. They don't have a pass rush at all without T.J. Watt. This offensive line playing well again with Donovan Smith and Tristan Wirfs holding down the tackles here. So Brady in a real good spot. The question again, is it going to be a little too easy to walk through? Well, last week wasn't so easy, and I look at this. I think they're going to just light it up here. I could see Tom Brady throwing for 350 and 3, and then they turn this game over to Leonard Fournette in the running game with a little bit of Rachaad White in the second half. But I don't see how the Steelers hang in here, and that's how I see Brady just making sure that this game is not in doubt. I mean, it was a little too close for comfort. The Grady Jarrett call really helped the Bucs, of course, win that game last week. So Brady's going to put this one out of reach for sure for the Steelers. Now, you also look at his history. Going back to the Patriots, he's shredded the Steelers. Geno Smith, look, I thought the matchup was tough in New Orleans. He just took that to the woodshed here with his receivers. He's just getting it done. This offensive line is playing fantastic. The running game's always going to be there. Now it's Walker instead of Rashad Penny. The weapons are always there. Metcalf, Lockett, the tight ends, everything is lining up. So love Geno Smith this week as a streamer against the Cardinals at home, by the way. So that's also very helpful. Kirk Cousins it's been a little bit disappointing. It really comes down to the touchdowns. And this is frustrating, right? It's very similar to Tom Brady, where you line up a team, you got an elite receiver, it needs that touchdown there. And I think Justin Jefferson can be a bigger touchdown guy. I think it's a great game for Adam Thielen to get in the end zone. So Cousins should give you the 2 touchdowns you're looking for. And Dolphins will see. Teddy Bridgewater might actually play this week, and that could create some resistance against the Vikings D there that can help Cousins put up more volume. Trevor Lawrence, I actually do like. He played pretty well in the first matchup. It wasn't spectacular against the Colts. It was only 235 yards passing, but I think they'll get going this week. The Gus Bradley defense is leaving a lot to be desired. Russell Wilson actually missed a lot of throws there that could have converted there, and Lawrence won't miss those throws to Christian Kirk this week after a rough week for sure, playing the Texans at home in that loss. Jimmy Garoppolo, again, pretty solid matchup last week against Carolina, high floor player. Same thing with Atlanta this week. So 49ers can run pretty well in Atlanta. We know that, but there's going to be some big play opportunities on that fast track with Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle. So I like Jimmy Garoppolo quite a bit this week there at quarterback. So there's the quarterbacks there that I do like, the rankings, so breaking them down, and the guys that you need to get in your lineups this week to help you win. We will get into the quarterbacks that you don't want to play this week. Avoid them as much as possible here in your fantasy football leagues. We'll do that, then look at the running backs there that we want to play, our rankings and recommendations there before we close with the running back sits on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football. Now, a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. Now, we can all have a lot of challenges in life. I've had a few obstacles that have come my way here in the past year. It can be tough to train your brain to stay in problem-solving mode when faced with those challenges in life. But when you learn how to find your own solutions, there's no better feeling. A therapist can help you become a better problem solver, making it easier to accomplish your goals, no matter how big or small. That's definitely worked for me. My personal experience with therapy, it's been life-changing. I have one that I talk to at least once every month, and I think everyone should try it because we all need help solving our problems, and it's not always easy for us. So if you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option for you. And the best thing about BetterHelp, it's very affordable, and it's entirely online, so that's great. So convenient and accessible while you're at home. You can get matched with a therapist after filling out a brief survey and switch therapists at any time there, so you know you have the right person helping you solve your problems. When you want to become a better problem solver, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/lockedon there to get 10% off your first month. All right, we will continue the show here on Locked On Fantasy Football in a moment. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Make sure you check out NFL Q Predictions every Friday on Locked On NFL. Locked On's local experts give you the inside scoop on the 5 biggest games of the NFL weekend, including Sunday and Monday Night Football, plus betting advice from the field's leading experts, BetOnline. Follow NFL Q Predictions every Friday in Locked On NFL. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts, much like Locked On Fantasy Football. All right, let's go to the running backs or the quarterbacks that we don't like this week. We'll get in the running backs. Don't worry, we're getting there. And let's look at this Thursday night game. If you need a quarterback in this game, it is not Carson Wentz. I just don't trust him. His Bears pass rush is decent. They're better in the back end, but you don't have Jahan Dotson in the lineup. I think he's going to cool off. He's a better guy at home against weak defenses, but on the road, short week, I think the pressure of his coach calling him out, Ron Rivera, is going to get to him a little bit. But Wentz is a bit of a sensitive guy there. So you have to think about the mental state of Wentz. I mean, he's going to press a little bit more. He's going to maybe try to do too much. And that can backfire. And I also think it's a better matchup there for the Commanders to get their running game going, Brian Robinson. And it's not a high-scoring game. I mean, if you're going to go with a quarterback, I'd go with Justin Fields in this one because the Commanders' defense is so bad. And he's at home, and he can run a little bit in this one. But Carson Wentz, he's going to be a week-to-week guy. We're going to play the matchups with him for sure. We saw it was atrocious against the Cowboys just 2 weeks ago. The pressure got to him, but last week, very comfortable against the Titans. Goes for more than 300 yards, has a couple scores to Diami Brown. Could have had, I think, one more at the end of the game, but he had the interception there. So Carson Wentz, again, week-to-week guy with Carson Wentz. He's going to come through in certain weeks, but this week is not one of them. If you're going to go with the quarterback from this game, if you're desperate, you have to go with Fields this week. Russell Wilson, we're going to be hopeful that this bye will help, or this mini bye, I should say, will get him going here. They played Thursday last. They played Monday this time. I'm not going to feel it. The Chargers' run defense is bad, but their pass defense is still pretty good with their cover people, including Asante Samuel Jr., the former Bronco Bryce Callahan. Their pass rush doesn't have Joey Bosa, but it's Khalil Mack. So I don't like this at all for Russell Wilson this week. So no, you're not going to suddenly expect Wilson to show up again. Matthew Stafford, the Panthers are in shambles here, but they're pretty good defensively. So I'm not going to go there. It's just hard to play him right now. And to me, he's more droppable than startable. That's how far we've gone down with Matthew Stafford here this season. Zach Wilson here. I like him overall. He's got some moxie. He can score rushing touchdowns for the Jets. He has good weapons. The offensive line could be better when there's health there for the Jets. But we're looking at it. I don't see it here in Green Bay there. Look, Daniel Jones had a decent game last week against the Packers, but not enough fantasy value there in a win. So I'm not feeling it with Zach Wilson. I think it's going to be a lot of Breece Hall to try to keep the Jets in the game this week. Daniel Jones, not going to buy it. The Ravens defense, if you look at them, change their philosophy a little bit, less blitzing there, post Wink Martindale. So they're in a good spot here to contain the Giants, and also no threat of that Giants secondary. So Daniel Bellinger alone is not going to get it done for Daniel Jones there for production, and neither is Darius Slayton being your number one receiver. Jacoby Brissett, nope. This could be tempting, but we saw what happened last week, Jared Goff. I think you have to totally be off it there. You're trying to stream Jacoby Brissett this week. This matchup, no, you're not going to go with it. Remember, Bill Belichick and the Patriots know Jacoby Brissett. They drafted him. He played there in the Jimmy Garoppolo era behind Tom Brady. So, yeah, we're not going with Jacoby there at all. And Kenny Pickett, I love Kenny Pickett as a longer-term guy. I think he's going to end up being a fantasy football asset, just not right now in a matchup like this against the Buccaneers. All right, let's turn our attention to running backs, and we'll rank my Sweet 16, if you will, here for week number 6. Nick Chubb every week. I know the Patriots will game plan a little bit to stop Nick Chubb, but this Browns running game is just on fire here. So Chubb is going to be the guy here, but everything else I think is going to struggle against the Patriots. So I still going to go Nick Chubb number 1. Austin Eckler's also been crushing it. The Broncos' run defense is a little bit overrated. We saw actually some bursts from Jackson and Philip Lindsay last week against them. So Eckler at home, love that. He'll stay hot. Saquon Barkley, they're going to use him quite a bit against the Ravens. We saw the Ravens' run defense having a few more leaks than usual here. So they're going to run, and the volume is going to be there for Barkley. He's number 3. Dalvin Cook, who's on fire. He had 2 touchdowns last week. He's kind of starting to feel it in this power run blocking scheme there of the Vikings, where the blocking has been good. So Dalvin Cook, fire him up. He's back in our good graces here as an RB1. Christian McCaffrey here, looking at him, he's just been pretty solid. Touchdown, 100 yards. One of those things seems to happen every week, sometimes both there. And the new coaching staff here, well, they still have Ben McAdoo, but no Matt Rule, no Phil Snow. The Steve Wilkes, Al Holcomb era kind of begins here. So for a while in the interim, they've actually been there before in Carolina. But you look at McCaffrey, he's been pretty solid. The Rams defense, pretty tough against the run, but we did see a good game from Tony Pollard, a similar type back last week. Leonard Fournette can keep crushing it for the Bucs. He's had 2 big weeks there in a row, and week 1 was also great against the Cowboys, so he'll be great against the Steelers this week. Jonathan Taylor, if you've been waiting for Jonathan Taylor, be patient. I think it's coming this week against the Jaguars. He's going to produce big time. So he's well rested. This Jaguars run defense we saw against Dameon Pierce starting to show cracks. Its true nature here. So love Jonathan Taylor this week. Rhamondre Stevenson, great spot here with Damian Harris down. He's in the top 10 this week, easily running back 8 here. He's got the role to himself. The Browns run defense is terrible. Really, I would not be surprised to see if he finished in the top 3 this week, but he's a must start. Breece Hall is also a guy that we have to play this week. He's in the top 10. He looks fantastic for the Jets, the rookie from Iowa State. So the Packers have been pretty vulnerable. We saw Saquon and also Gary Brightwell score against the Packers last week. So great news for Breece Hall there this week. I'm not going to extend to Michael Carter. However, Jeff Wilson Jr., he's really taking control with the speed and power of this job of the 49ers. Tevin Coleman's getting a few touches, but it is Wilson in the lead. Aaron Jones, I think he'll rebound. He usually does well at home, and it's a good matchup for him against the Jets. Alvin Kamara got going last week. Get well game against the Seahawks defense. I think he continues this week, regardless of what Taysom Hill's role is. So those are your RB1s for sure in 12-team leagues. Now, just out of that, Joe Mixon, he's going to get going, but he's been pretty solid here of late with touchdowns, and he's always going to be a threat there. So that's the thing is Mixon will get going. Remember, a lot of his damage was done late last season when they got the pass game to be so dangerous and things opened up. I think Mixon will be fine this week, at least as an RB2 with some upside. Melvin Gordon, he's got the backfield for now, so Chargers run defense is bad. Mike Boone, Latavius Murray, Gordon, that situation could cloud us a little bit, but we're going to go with that. Miles Sanders, we're seeing a little bit run from Kenneth Gainwell. Sanders have been up and down. We don't know what you're going to get, another big game or a mild game. Well, they're playing the Cowboys this week. I think it's going to be kind of in the middle of the road game where I could see him get 60 yards and a score there. And David Montgomery, there, you got to play him. He's back in the lead role, healthy, in the Thursday nighter against the Commanders. So those are the 16 guys I would definitely put in my lineups there this week. We look at J.K. Dobbins. I was getting ahead. We have J.K. Dobbins, D.K. Metcalf, A.J. Dillon. There's a lot of initial guys here in fantasy football, but J.K. Dobbins, Ja'Kalen Dobbins, there at the Giants. I think he'll come through. The Ravens should give him the ball a little bit more playing off Lamar this week. I think he at least gets in the end zone once against the Giants. Kenneth Walker is going to be the feature back for the Seahawks going forward this season. You'll see a little bit of DJ Dallas. The matchup against the Cardinals is good enough at home to feel good with that. Kareem Hunt, again, the Browns are going to go run heavy as much as possible. They'll have to dump off to Hunt. I think you'll see a little bit of David Njoku and Amari Cooper taking out of the game a little bit. So a lot more receiving run for Hunt here to supplement Nick Chubb. You have A.J. Dillon, again, where Aaron Jones produces well, it means A.J. Dillon is going to be involved. This game script is also going to be positive here for A.J. Dillon to be good here this week. And Rahim Mustard, he is the Dolphins' offense now quite a bit. They're going to lean on the run. They phased out Chase Edmonds quite a bit last week. Myles Gaskin is a distant number 2 as a receiving back. So Mostert, they'll stay in the game against the Vikings, and a good matchup this week. I'm looking at James Robinson and Travis Etienne this week. The Colts can be pretty vulnerable. I like Etienne a little bit more, I'll be honest with you, but Robinson fading a little bit. You had more snaps there for Etienne last week. He had 100 yards from scrimmage. Robinson did not look all that good in relation to Etienne, so maybe a little bit of changing the guard back to what we thought early in the season, but the Jaguars team is probably going to keep it grounded a little bit more this week, open things up for Lawrence. I do like Tony Pollard there. The Eagles can give up some yards to his type of back. There we saw Benjamin score against the Eagles last week. Pollard is going to get in the open field and make a big play. He's been doing that with Cooper Rush, and we expect Cooper Rush to start one more time this week. Cam Akers, looking at him with the Panthers. I mean, the Panthers got gashed by the combination of Jeff Wilson Jr. and Tevin Coleman, so I think the Rams will go run heavy, try to get a win here. They're desperate to do that against the Panthers. Brian Robinson Jr., yeah, we said they're going to be a little bit run heavier. The Commanders, I think that's a good spot here for this team for sure, where they'll get him going. Antonio Gibson is pretty much done here as a lead back here for fantasy football this season. I think they're going to use a lot more J.D. McKissick in the change of pace role to catch passes, and a lot of Brian Robinson Jr., the power back out of Alabama. All right, we've looked at all the rankings here for the must-starts, and then we've looked at the guys I do recommend for you in your fantasy football leagues at that position, whether it's running back, traditional, RB1, RB2, or flex this week. It is a lot of exciting action here in the NFL as we get into week 6. We're almost, believe it or not, a really 40% through the season here. So betonline.net is your number one source for football betting information this season, the rest of the season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis in every game you can find. As always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sporting wagering information. So good stuff there that we can point to there that you need, and it's going to be helpful for you to dominate there in your betting endeavors. Always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sporting wager information. Live betting up to the minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easy way to check in all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to betonline.net or use the mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, it is time to close the show here on Locked On Fantasy Football and look at our running backs that we would not force into our lineups this week if we have better options. Keep that in mind. Sometimes these are your best options to play here, but just breaking down the matchups for you to say what we like and don't like. The Bills, tough matchup for any running back. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, very touchdown dependent this season and didn't happen last week. It was the Travis Kelce show, 4 red zone touchdowns. So Edwards-Helaire was close. But if you don't get the touchdowns, you're not getting much else from Edwards-Helaire. So can't feel the Bills giving up a rushing score in this game. So can't go there. You're also seeing Jerick McKinnon and Isaiah Pacheco getting a little bit more run. So can't go with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I don't think, unless you get the touchdown. That's what you're rolling with this week. Najee Harris, why do we want to play him? I don't understand. He hasn't really produced of late. This is a tough matchup. The Steelers' offensive line's in shambles. The Buccaneers is as bad as it gets. It'll get better for Najee Harris, not in this particular matchup. So he's the guy that I want to trade for while his value is going to be the absolute lowest after this game, but not going to play him if I've got the depth to sit him, and he might this week, depending on how it shakes out with the bye weeks. Devin Singletary, he hasn't done much. I don't know why we keep playing him. He's only had one valuable week here in fantasy football. And again, we're seeing a little bit more James Cook to clean up. Zach Moss in the passing game. They're pretty much a throwing team all the time here. And this is why we've heard rumors about going for Christian McCaffrey or another receiving back, because they're just not totally sold on just forcing running the ball with Devin Singletary. Ezekiel Elliott, it's over, I think. I mean, you look at the free agent pending, Pollard just look better. They're realizing it there pretty much in Dallas. Elliott's got a lot of mileage on him, man, and you're seeing it here as he's slowing down. He's very touchdown dependent as well, and I don't see that happening against the Eagles. The Falcons, what do you do here? Tyler Algier and Damian Williams might return, and you got Caleb Huntley. It's just pretty ugly here without Cordarrelle Patterson. We never thought we'd say this. We miss Cordarrelle Patterson as running back. We know he was the man. 49ers matchup was brutal this week. You really can't go to Mike Boone this week. I know you might have some value, but Latavius Murray's in this mix. I don't know how it's going to shape up really between Gordon, Murray, and Boone. I'm best confident that Gordon is going to get the key touches in a revenge game in a good matchup against the Chargers this week. Michael Carter had a couple touchdowns last week for the Jets, but I do not see him being all that effective this week. So with running back, we're starting to get better data here and the fantasy points per against. And look, it still happened last week. The Texans were the biggest liability against the run. It just happened with Travis Etienne versus James Robinson in that matchup. So something to watch. It's a bigger sample size right now, and it's one of the most reliable sources there in fantasy football. If a team is good against the run and they're going to do it consistently, you also examine how they do against the running backs in coverage, because some teams struggle there, but they're good at stopping the run. There, I think you look at the situation. The Bills are a good example, right? They have Matt Milano. They got good linebacker core there. And the safeties are we're going to attack this week. They also don't give up much up front in the running game. So either way, however you look at it, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to have a tough time getting going this week. So that's how you kind of looking down there. Look at the number and average. See what type of backs have success against a particular team. Dig deep a little bit more. That's what we're going to do for you here. Locked on Fantasy Football to figure out the right plays across positions. But as you get more data points and you have a little bit more experience with the matchups, know exactly how teams are playing, personnel, injury, all that, it's going to become easier actually in the second half here to navigate through the bye weeks and injuries here on your fantasy football team. Again, thanks again to BetterHelp, our sponsor for today's show. And thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Our next episode will focus on the wide receiver, tight end, and defense ranking start sit advice there on Matchup Thursday. Now make your second listen to the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson give you the expert NFL analysis you need in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. We'll check you out on Thursday breaking down the wide receivers, tight ends, and defenses for Week 6.